Have you ever thought about this? That a person can be an Enneagram 8, but sort of be tamed and controlled, muted. Well, I just did like a couple days ago. I started putting this together. I mean, man, I really wanted to be an Enneagram 9. I felt really good about it. Because an Enneagram 9 is pretty much everybody likes a 9. And you're not a jerk if you're a 9. You're not arrogant if you're 9. You're not too bossy or controlling if you're a 9. So I was like, yeah, I'm Enneagram 9, wing 8. Yeah, okay, I can work with that. I know I've got the anger and I know I've got the 8 in me, but it's not my main number. I'm a 9. All right, so now I'm there. I did it. I realized it. I am the 8. Yes, wing 9, and yes, social subtype. But I wrote in my notes here, walking contradiction. As far as, I've always been an 8. I mean, I can look back my entire life. I can look back to preschool and think of the anger issues that I had. But it's interesting, something my wife and I were talking about this past week is about how every household has its own culture, its own, here's the main rule. So like my wife had said, in their household, it was all about working hard and taking care, being busy working was your identity. You are what you do. And at my household, and I had to ask my wife, because I didn't know what you grew up as, you don't know what your thing is. But she said, for my household, it was about being present, and it was about being a good person, having a good reputation. So if you're born a boy and you're an Enneagram 8 and you grew up in a household where you have to always be on your best behavior to be a good person, it does mute that 8-ness. Like, it doesn't change all that stirring inside of me. But I think that I've always had to learn, because I still wanted to make my parents happy. I was told, like, okay, you're going to be a good person. And I remember being a little boy, like, in preschool, my mom, like, I was having this just rageful fit. And I remember her telling me, like, you can't act that way. This is not how you act. And so that was the concept that was ingrained in me. So I learned to behave. I learned to subdue these emotions, these anger emotions, which is like the main one, but I've learned to basically control it. Now, granted, I've had issues with being controlling. I've had issues with being overly critical even of myself, because a lot of that was, you got to be a good person, you got to behave. And hey, there's nothing wrong with that. Like, that's a very good thing to grow up with, knowing that you need to be a good person who acts like a civilized, loving person. But at the same time, it didn't change what was going on the inside. And I think what's happened is the older I get, the more I kind of break free of like behaving, and I've been a little bit more vocal and expressive about what's going on. And ultimately what that means is I've learned to be more vulnerable, which is the exact path of growth for an 8. And so the more that I've wanted to understand myself better by actually getting into Enneagram a couple years ago, it's finally got me there where I can be vulnerable enough to understand, okay, it's okay. It's okay to be an Enneagram 8. And it's okay that, like, I have this desire to be a good man and be perceived as that. And granted, I will say that could be a trigger for me when it's implied that I'm not a good man. That may set me off. And, I guess it is a trigger, because my whole identity is being a good person. I need to be perceived as a creative hard worker where I work. I need to be seen as a committed, present husband and father. Like, it's important to me. And that is the little bit of people pleaser that is part of my drive as well. But it's just interesting that, like, you can be a well-behaved 8. And it's not even necessarily the same as being a healthy 8. Maybe there's an overlap there to some degree. But I just thought an 8 is going to act angry and arrogant no matter what happens. It's just me like the Tasmanian devil. But, and it could be that because I grew up in the household and culture that I did, that's why I ended up shifting to have that 9 wing that's more dominant, and how I ended up having the social subtype, because that could work in the parameters of being an Enneagram 8. If I'm focused on mentoring and helping other people, and I keep things calm and stable and peaceful and non-judgmental, then I can exist in this world, because I can still be the things that I need to be for everybody, and I can channel that energy in the right place. I mean, had I grown up in a different household, I could have been a monster. And I'm aware of that. And I'm grateful that I grew up in the household and the family that I did. Like, I think it was a bit miraculous because I don't want to think about how I could have turned out had I not been raised in a loving home where basically the focus to be a good, mild-mannered person was part of the culture. So I think that's an interesting new topic. That's the story of my life. I'd love to hear from you. Your comments belong right here.